Welcome back to the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast. So grateful to have you back here every week, coming with you another episode. We're going to pick up where we left off in this last episode. So if you missed our last episode where I talked about the four horsemen of the apocalypse. This is something that John Gottman talks about in a lot of his marriage research. We talked about the challenges of that framework and understanding and using the five voices, where I'm going to continue today, where we navigate these relationship tensions. Uh, it's unavoidable. And we're going to jump right in here today on the tensions we all face in our work, in our home life. We're going into the heat of a political season here. I'm recording this at the beginning of September here, 2024, as we're going into, just a couple months away, literally 2 months away from an election season. And inevitably tensions rise when we talk about, different things in the political world. We talk about things in our personal lives where we're struggling with challenges, living with people that are different than us. It's just a part of life, right? We have these challenges, but how do we do it well? How do we show up as that intelligent human leader where we lead ourselves well and we can appreciate the other voices? We don't necessarily agree with all of them, but we can appreciate what they bring in the mix. And so I wanted to come back to this episode and help you focus on practical strategies that you can deal with uh, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Those are the four horsemen in the John Gottman language. You can look up John Gottman. A lot of great research there. But I thought those elements: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling. Do you experience one or more of those, or quite honestly, do you uh, express them yourself? You may be experiencing them from somebody else, but you also may be expressing them to others. And so on the last episode, I highlighted particularly the five voices, which is a framework of understanding our leadership voice, how we orient ourselves naturally. For those of you that aren't aware, I'm a connector voice, and you can take a free assessment by just messaging me or going to stewardyourbusiness.com and five voices, and it's there, absolutely free. But part of it is understanding what is your preferred way of being, how do you show up, and where do tensions come because of that. Uh, all of us in our natural state, even in our best state, are going to cause tension with others around us. We can learn how to better navigate that and not get into destructive patterns. And so that's why I want to help you in your desire to adjust, to change, to become compatible, if you will, with those that are different voices. And so in this podcast, I'm all about equipping you and giving you resources to help you implement in your daily life. I can't solve all the problems on the podcast. You've heard me say that before, but you're going to walk away from this podcast today, listen to it, and find actionable items that can help you. And hopefully you're going to recognize in yourself and others around you. And so one way we look at this is the guardian nurture perspective. Guardians and nurturers, those voices are very present oriented. And oftentimes they're looking for order, they're looking for stability. They have a very practical focus on the here and the now. And so their way of being is really that. They're looking at the present, while guardians are more oriented to tasks and more focused that way, where nurturers are more focused on the emotional side of things. How is everybody feeling? How everybody doing? They want to create a predictable, secure environment for family, for community. And that's a beautiful thing. In fact, most people are one or the other voices. They're either a guardian, which is about 30% of the population, or nurture, which is over 40%, almost 43% of the population is a nurture. So you're going to encounter one of these voices most likely. In my case, my wife's a guardian. I know many other guardians and nurturers. When I was working with a client today who's a nurturer. And so there's a very strong bent to, again, look for stability, predictability, that things are being addressed. And this is different than some of the other voices I'm going to highlight as far as like a connector, like my voice, where I maybe in any one of these voices, maybe if they're unhealthy, they're calling you to be like that. Now, I'm not against stability and order and practical focus. In fact, I know very much need it, but my natural bent is more future oriented. It's looking and being flexible. And so there's some challenges there which can mean I'm feeling inadequate or frustrated about myself because I'm not measuring up to potentially a guardian or nurturer's expectations. And so it's important to recognize your emotions here and see how they impact your relationship, not just the connector voice, but all the voices. They're different. For example, a creative voice is similar in the tensions you may face as a connector, in that creatives have visionary ideas. They're also somewhat, very open and flexible because they like to see all the possibilities out there. But then the guardians and nurturers may meet that with skepticism because they're a little bit maybe not so practical. That's why they're creative, and so but they need the nurture and the guardians as well. There's going to be natural tensions are going to arise when you're leaning into your natural voice. And I don't want you to back away from that. I want to empower you and understand that you're going to face it. How can you face it well? And encourage you to be that most intelligent human leader by applying the things you're learning here on the podcast. And if you need further help, that's where you reach out to me and Steward Your Business, and we'll dive deeper in that with you or your team. But for example, I want to jump back to our nurturers. I was just working with a nurturer today who she's very much prioritizes the care of her clients. She does physical therapy and things of that nature, and harmony. And what happens is struggles when there's criticism or pointed. It's not because they don't think that the criticism even warranted. They're already the hardest on themselves, and so they're always looking at the future. Where maybe a creative or pioneer or connector is, we're looking at the future and saying, "Hey, you should be thinking about this, that, and the other thing." And it's not that they don't care about that. It's not that they don't think it's important. It's just not where they naturally go. And so, if you're beating them up, so to speak, from a perspective with criticism or even contempt, like, "Why don't you ever think about this?" Um, they're already feeling bad about themselves. So you're not probably going to get the productivity, the engagement that you desire if you're kind of steamrolling over them. Um, Another way we could look at this here is the pioneer voice. The pioneer voice is actually most uncommon of the voices. About 7% of the population are pioneers. They focus on strategy and results. You can think of somebody like an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs or Donald Trump, even, they are focused on strategy and results, but their directness and drive may be too aggressive or, you know, dismissive. And that can negatively affect nurturers and guardians that are very much present oriented and they're looking at things. And again, not that nurturers or guardians don't like results, they're not strategic. They do value those things. Again, it's just not in their natural way of being. And so we have to understand when we feel the tensions rise, there's this gap between who we are and who another person is. And we recognize, okay, there's going to be tension. And so I don't want you to act in an unhealthy way when the tensions arise, but I want to help bridge that gap when that does come up. How can we bridge the gap? What are some practical strategies that we can do to empower you? And I'm going to highlight that here on the podcast today uh, across all five voices, starting with myself, the connector voice, and we can do a deep dive. This is one thing I really like in the five voices assessment. We go through this further on how do people make decisions, how do they collaborate with other folks, and there's all different ways you can go about it. But practical strategies we can do when these tensions arise. These relational tensions will come. It's not if, it's when they come. How will you be prepared as that most intelligent human leader to address it? Because if you are not addressing it well, let me tell you, it's kind of like cancer. It's going to spread throughout your organization, other relationships. Your children will see it at home. Those that you work with, it'll leak out. It will come and it will contaminate, if you will, the organization, the culture. So we don't want you to be one that is doing more harm than good. We want to empower you to lead yourself and lead your team well. For connectors, I'm going to give you an example of how to bridge the gap. you know, emphasize the importance of acknowledging the guardian's desire for structure and validate them. As a connector, you can bridge the gap by acknowledging that, recognizing that this is actually how they show you they really care, what they want, how they contribute value, and recognizing that together we can create these shared strengths by creating a vision and being relational with one another. Connectors are very relational in providing resources. They're not so relational in emotional connection at times, speaking from one myself. But one way you can bridge the gap is look at collaborative goal setting. How do we achieve the goals? And honestly, connectors very much need the guardians and the nurtured voices to achieve said desire, said opportunity you get excited about. You need them to come alongside and help bring in stability and support your flexibility. You're moving around like, okay, how can we support you? For example, creating routines that allow for both consistency and opportunities for connection. Uh, that we need to make sure things are done well, and that nurturers can make sure that there's actual relationships between the teams. Everybody's needs are being met and understood. Um, so lean into other voices that are not your strength and allow them to help you. Uh, don't don't dismiss them. Don't minimize that. The tension should be including you in. And if somebody starts to act in a negative, I call the apocalyptic voice, where they're criticizing, they're being contempt, they're being defensive, they're even stonewalling. That means there's themselves, they've got some damage, they've got some things that they've got to work on. But be clued into that, like recognizing it. Okay, so if a guardian is showing contempt, let's just say, because I keep changing things all the time, clue into that and engage them and say, hey, I need your help. How can we make things more stable? How can we work through some things here? And you could help me make this happen, and empower them. For creatives, um, communicate that vision with practicality. This is hard because creatives are not practical by nature, and that's okay. That's their natural way of being. But what we can do is frame their vision ideas so that the guardians and nurturers can come in. They need to know how to link these big ideas to tangible outcomes. Invite them to speak into your vision, invite your dreams as a creative. Seek that feedback early on and allow them to speak into your process. They'll help ground your ideas and avoid potential conflict later. If you keep going on and you don't bring these voices in, especially if you're going to need to have them help you in implementing your ideas. That's what a great creator does. They're able to bring those other voices in as they understand and lead themselves. If you're a nurturer, for example, express your needs clearly. This is something that I was talking to a colleague about, that you need to be able to express your needs for care and support and recognize where, if you don't say that, you may be run over. Particularly, this is something for pioneers to be aware of. You may run over not just a nurturer, but a lot of different voices. So I want to encourage you as a nurturer to express, encourage, have an open dialogue. Uh, I recommend you have regular check-ins. If you're a nurturer, you need to make sure you have regular check-ins to express what's going on. Um, Speak first if you're a nurturer, because oftentimes you need to feel heard and valued. And if everyone's talking, your tendency is to be quiet and just let everybody talk and whatnot. If you're coming out of a challenging situation, let's just say an environment, maybe you had a tough conversation and the day before, or even today, and you're going into another conversation with a strong personality or a voice like a pioneer, be proactive. Express to them, hey, I'm coming out of a tough situation today. My energy level is low, or I'm dealing with a lot of emotions and challenges that I've faced today. It's not that I don't care about what you have to say. I just want you to understand where I'm coming from. These little bits that I'm sharing with you today help you be that most intelligent leader. And and when we go through this, and I understand that I'm telling you some of these things on the fly, and it's hard. This is something I practiced for years. Uh, and I've gotten much better at it. One thing you can do when these emotions come up is I want you to process the stories and the things that are coming through there. Oftentimes, we don't allow ourselves that ability, that space, and so um, I've talked about that on previous episodes about the stack tool, and I want to encourage you to go back to those. You can just look up stack or change your story in any of my previous episodes. There's a lot of resources I talk about there that will help you unpack those emotions a little bit more, um, and empower you to again get at the root of what is it. We all have these challenges that we're facing, these tensions. Um, and so I want to again empower you that you can understand that better. If you're a guardian, remember that the structure that you're providing and putting in place and checks and balances, which are all good, have some flexibility there. Remember that these systems and processes are only as good as people that are adopting them and engaging in them. Recognizing there's other voices and ways of doing things, and they don't always have to be exactly the same way, but give them a way and say, hey, this is a framework that works. This is one I know it works, but recognize that having some flexibility and appreciation of the other voices. Oftentimes, you may have been doing something for years and it will work to a certain degree, but it doesn't work anymore. And that's where a creative can come in, for example, and help you see some things differently. And when you feel the tension rise, just invite it and understand, okay, I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to help me improve the system or process, and I need to be open to that. And if they do, and then you can adopt it and you can write all the steps down of how you guys got there. Honestly, creatives don't like doing all that. They like to bring up the ideas and then allow others, such as a guardian, to help them enumerate the process. Um, for pioneers, understand and have empathy to go along with your directness. Um, your directness is really important, but just temper that drive. I want to encourage you not to change who you are. Just know who you're talking to. Who is your audience? Who are they listening? Who is that? Is it a guardian or a nurturer? They're going to be, more sensitive. Even a connector could be deal adversely with your response. May shut down. They may stonewall you because they just feel like, man, they're just rolling over me. I'm just gonna shut myself off. Now, again, stonewalling, uh, showing contempt, being defensive, and being overly critical for the sake of being critical is not healthy. So, if you're showing up in one of those things, I'm not saying that's right, but I want you to recognize that as a leader, if you're seeing any of your team members, or even listening of yourself, that you're seeing any of those aspects in your life, I want you to encourage you too to invite. This is going to be uncomfortable for some of you to invite feedback. What is it like to be on the other side of me? I know what we like it to be. We all have positive thoughts about how people think about that. Um, but in reality, how really is that? Can you lean into that? Or are you being more protective of yourself? And our ego gets in the way. You can go back to one of the earlier podcast episodes where I talked about that ego not allowing us to serve those around us in a healthy way. Um, and so we can use this framework to help us, the five voices, for better communication and break through the tensions. Like I said, the tensions are inevitable. Um, if again in your organization, if you're a guardian, for example, you're creating that safe environment. The way you can create that stability is have a dialogue. Use your strengths to say, "Hey, here's how I help. I can create a structured, clear uh, plan. I can draw it out, and be open to new ideas, even if they seem impractical. You're documenting it. You can say, here's how I can help. I can write down all the processes and recognize that, hey, a creative may come in and have a different way of doing things. A connector may bring a new resource I haven't thought about. Be open to that. Appreciate the different voices. This is going to help you be more productive in the long run, because what we want to do is when you're communicating with your team, And if they feel rejected, if they feel kind of just eviscerated because of criticism or contempt, because they just feel like, man, I just cannot do anything right. The way they roll their eyes, or the way they just huff and they huff and they puff. I don't feel good about myself. If you're what you're trying to get done is, um, a good objective as a guardian, just recognize, to lose that energy and engagement for your team is really you're not going to be able to get that objective done. Not everybody is like you. And so whether you're a guardian or nurturer or connector or creative, every way we communicate is slightly different. Um, Nurturers are very care based. They're always asking, how are people doing? And feeling like, how's everybody heard and felt, and just understand nurturers. You also need to recognize that your needs need to be met as well. You may feel guilty or overlooked. I want to empower you again, because if you feel guilty or overlooked, you actually might be more critical, and unfortunately, or you might um, be defensive, like, oh, I don't know why, why I'm doing this. I'm so sorry. You're being put on the defensive, and we don't want you to be that way. We want you to make your needs getting met. You want to make sure you take care of yourself as well. Um, and so a creative needs to look in ways that they invite criticism early on, and recognizing that it's going to help their ideas get better, and actually be more tangible, make it realistic. They could actually have it happen. And I mentioned earlier about the pioneer's role in communication earlier, about having empathy, having understanding for the other person, who you're talking to, that that if you're talking to a nurturer or guardian, they're present oriented, they're looking at things here in the now. And so when you talk with them, you have to put it in that language almost. Think about, like, if we're speaking different languages to each other, speaking louder doesn't help. And pioneers often get louder. And you're like, that doesn't help. I don't understand the language of the way you're trying to get across. I actually just makes me feel worse. And so we can move from criticism to appreciation, contempt to respect, from defensiveness to openness, from stonewalling to engagement. How I've highlighted some of these things on the podcast with you today. There's so much more I can do, but I want to empower you with some of these things and identify where you're showing up, where you're expressing criticism, contempt, defensiveness, or stonewalling. I want to want you to move, be transformed to a place of appreciation of respect and gratitude, to being open, discover, and engaging. This may sound familiar, but this is also what I've talked about in my podcast before as well. Your core four. What does your day look like? What does your habits look like? How do you live and show up in life? And are you progressing? Are you becoming this better version of yourself, or are you regressing or stuck? We don't stay neutral. It's either we're being building up or we're breaking down. You get to choose. You get to decide to become that most intelligent human leader. You get to navigate these relational tensions with humbleness, with appreciation, with gratitude, knowing that you can be a person showing respect, that you can welcome these different voices, being open to them, and you can be the one to engage. You can be the one to go first. That's what it means to be the most intelligent human leader. And you don't have to go alone. You've got me here, David Carr of Steward Your Business. That's why I do this podcast every week. That's why I share the resources. You guys follow me on your favorite social media platform, be it LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok. You can find me there. And if I'm not on one that you would like to follow along, let me know, and I'll see about getting on there. But nonetheless, I really appreciate you guys listening in today, taking the time to invest in yourself and become that most intelligent human leader. You can overcome the four horsemen of the apocalypse. You can be the antidote for criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling in yourself. And it starts with us, and then we can lead others. Thank you guys so much for listening. Come back for much more. Every week we have a new episode, and I appreciate you guys being a part of it and sharing your comments, your feedback. It is so welcomed. Leave a 5-star review if you're so inclined. I would love to love to have that from you guys on your favorite podcast platform. And until then, take care, be wise, leading yourself well and your teams. Thanks everybody for listening.